Good evening, Plexers. This is for Liam. Sorry it's taken me all day to get back to you. I actually forgot about you, so let's run through this before I go to bed. So, you're using Terminal to look at folders. I've been a Linux guy since I gave up Windows XP, and I do as much in the GUI as I can. So I did suggest doing this. So under Apps, I'll go to Installed Apps. Install this, the Dynamics File Manager. Once you do, when you're at when you're at the Main tab, you can browse into devices. So I have Unraid running on a 11th gen NUC with no storage. I'm using a pair of dissimilar SSDs, one SATA SSD 500 gigabytes and one NVMe 500 gigabytes joined in a cache pool to run Docker containers on. You can start the array up with a fake hard drive by using a flash drive, which is what I've done. Just a 64 gigabyte flash drive. You can see there's hardly anything written to it. It doesn't get used. It's just required to start the array. And of course my boot drive. And I have all my media on my Synology NAS where I used to run Plex. And I did this for the better 11th gen iGPU in a little Intel NUC. So I'm running a channels DVR server. I'm running Plex. And I'll go into the settings a little bit just to see if you can follow along to see if you're doing something different. Hopefully your Plex is set up on a cache pool and not on your Unraid array. So when you install that file manager, this little square with the arrow out of it, I can browse in, see the app data, go into the Plex container folder, library. So all the Linux installs all have the same folder structure. Application support, Plex media. And I think you were missing the media and the drivers, or media and codec, I'm not sure. But they're all here. And that's exactly what the install would look like on a Synology NAS. So let me pause this video for a second and bring that screen up. Okay, my quick connect information flashes quickly when I bring this Chrome app up. So if I go into File Station on the NAS, and this is a DS1520 Plus with a 9th gen Celeron. That's where I used to run my Plex server before I moved it lock, stock, and barrel over to the Unraid machine. So if I go into Docker and go into my test container on this server, is called Plex PD, and I can go down and you'll see it's the same folder structure with everything in here. So what I did is I learned how to use the Unraid on the NUC with a test Plex container. Tested it out for a while. It worked so well I added a few users to them. It all pointed back to the same media where this Docker container was running on my NAS. And when was it? Last October, November, I just shut down both servers, moved this container over to the Unraid box, and just spun it back up. I redid my paths for all my libraries, and everything was intact. So back to Unraid. I'd like to know what you see when you browse this way and not through Terminal. Okay, so let's go into Docker. I've got a couple people streaming, and if you haven't found this yet, install Plex Streams. It gives you a little info right in Docker. I'm sorry, right in Unraid. All right, so let's go into the container, and I kind of learned all this from scratch. I don't really know Unraid that well for storage, but I've gotten used to it for containers, and Ibercorp is the guide that I follow. So let's get the advanced view, and let's show more settings. Okay, so this is important. The default container, when I set it up, this was user, not cache. So I had to manually change that to cache to get it to go to my cache pool. So the containers of any Docker I run are on the cache pool, and there is no regular array in this setup. So with unassigned devices plug-in, I was able to mount my shears on the Synology NAS, and this is what I'm pointing back to. Now, because I wasn't 100% sure of how Docker worked on my Sino NAS, instead of having one path in the container to my shared media folder, I had created a path to every library sort folder I had. And because the container was already set up that way, I just recreated all those paths under Unraid. I probably could have switched to just one path to my shared media folder, but Unraid's kind of set up that way. When you do this Linux server container, it has two predetermined paths for TV and movies, and I just went with one for music and photos and other video library too, like I had it set up on the NAS. If I was doing it fresh, I just have one path to my shared media folder. So the IberCorp video taught me how to add what I need to have hardware accelerated transcoding, that part. And I have 32 gigs in this NUC, and I'm using 16 gigabytes for RAM transcoding, and that's this part. And if you find the IberCorp video, it'll explain all that. I don't want to transcode to my SSDs because of the wear and tear. So it's better to transcode to RAM, so all those read and writes during transcoding is not hitting the SSDs at all. And then the last part is just a no health check he had in it. So this was very easy to set up as a container. There's no permissions to grant any place because my unassigned devices plugin, when I mounted my Synology NAS, I've signed into those shares with a username I created just for Unraid. It's Unraid with a password. Unlike Linux, there's not really much permissions to do besides the container setup that this came pre-configured, PUID 99 and PGID 100. On my Synology NAS, it has something similar for the container, and I think one was 100 and one was 1,000. But I didn't change these. This was just pre-configured when I set up the Linux server container. So I'm just kind of showing you around here so you can check to see what you might have done differently. As a matter of fact, let me do this. Let me do something I can increase the font on. That opened up off screen. So you can just pause the video to see this. I'll make it even bigger. So this is the hardware acceleration for the Intel iGPU. This gives me the RAM transcoding. And this is the no health check. And let's go to the server so you can see the second part of the transcoding setup. Now I have a bunch of test servers set up that I do different videos on. So this is my main server on the NUC. And is it under the transcoding setting? Yes, so it's just this. So that's all you add to the server, and of course you drop down and save your changes, right? And you turn hardware accelerated transcoding on, these two checkboxes, and enable tone mapping. And make sure you save. And this will normally say auto. I like switching it to actually see what it is and save changes. So, watch this video, see what's different about your setup, and maybe take some screenshots of what's different and share it back into the post on Facebook. So everybody else, thanks for watching, and hopefully, Liam, we will get you closer to having it work the way you want it to.